You see a crown, a palace, and a ceremonial throne. What you don't see is a financial system older than most nations, quietly generating power without appearing on any billionaire list. King Charles III does not live a billionaire life. He oversees something far more elusive, a structure where land, law, and legacy compound wealth across centuries. Watch until the end, because the most shocking part is not how rich he is, but why his wealth cannot be taxed, challenged, or replicated. The crown is not the wealth, the system is. Power does not announce itself with cash balances or rankings. In its most advanced form, it hides behind architecture, law, and time. That is why trying to measure King Charles III using billionaire logic is already a mistake. What he inherited in September 2022 was not simply a crown or a collection of palaces, it was stewardship over one of the most sophisticated wealth systems ever constructed, a system designed centuries ago to survive revolutions, recessions, wars, and even the decline of monarchy itself. This is where the idea of a trillionaire life truly begins, not in money owned, but in assets controlled without being personally held. Unlike modern billionaires who accumulate wealth through companies, equity, or innovation, Charles sits above the market layer entirely. The British monarchy operates through a structure where assets are embedded into the state, protected by constitutional arrangements, and insulated from individual risk. This distinction matters because personal wealth can collapse while institutional wealth endures. When analysts describe Charles as a trillionaire, they are not claiming he has $1 trillion to spend, they are describing the scale of economic gravity surrounding his position. Land, seabeds, urban property, wind energy leases, art, and historical estates all orbit the crown, generating value without appearing on any balance sheet bearing his name. This is why Forbes-style rankings fail here. Those lists depend on ownership, clarity, share prices, and liquidity. Royal wealth is deliberately designed to be opaque, not for secrecy, but for stability. Much of the monarchy's power lies in assets that cannot be sold, seized, or easily valued, including historic land rights, ceremonial ownership, and long-term revenue agreements with the state. These assets exist to serve continuity and control, not consumption. They ensure that whoever wears the crown inherits influence without inheriting the fragility that comes with private fortune. The system also separates benefit from liability. Charles enjoys the upside of vast estates and income streams, yet avoids many of the risks that accompany personal ownership. Maintenance, security, and operational costs are absorbed by institutions, while revenues flow through carefully negotiated frameworks. This is wealth engineered to be politically untouchable and economically resilient. It explains how the monarchy can remain extraordinarily wealthy while presenting itself as a public-serving institution rather than a private empire. At this level, wealth stops being about accumulation and becomes about positioning. The crown functions as a permanent node in Britain's economic network, one that extracts value quietly, predictably, and indefinitely. That is why King Charles III cannot be meaningfully compared to entrepreneurs or oligarchs. His power is not measured by growth, but by survival across centuries. If this reframes how you think about wealth and power, share your thoughts below, because in the next part, the focus shifts to how Charles spent 64 years preparing financially for this role, long before the crown ever touched his head. Personal fortune versus royal control. Numbers create comfort because they look precise, yet with King Charles III, numbers are where misunderstanding begins, not where clarity is found. In 2025, the Sunday Times Rich List placed his personal fortune at approximately $820 million, while a 2023 Guardian investigation pushed the figure to nearly $2.3 billion. This gap is not an accounting error, it is architectural by design. These valuations are not debating cash in a bank account, they are colliding over a system intentionally built to blur the line between what is privately owned and what is institutionally controlled, and that gray zone is where royal wealth quietly compounds. The lower estimate includes only assets that can be clearly labeled personal. Investment portfolios valued around $180 million, private art holdings near $30 million, vehicles worth roughly $8 million, racehorses estimated at $35 million, and a legendary stamp collection valued at approximately $130 million. These are conventional elite assets, comparable to holdings maintained by Europe's oldest dynastic families, tangible, insurable, and theoretically liquid. On paper, this looks like extraordinary wealth. In reality, it represents only the visible layer. The higher valuation asks a far more uncomfortable question. What about assets that generate permanent personal benefit without formal ownership? This includes Balmoral Castle, valued near $100 million, and Sandringham Estate, estimated at $320 million. These are not Crown Estate properties, yet they function as lifelong tax-advantaged residences embedded into the monarchy's operational core. They exist to guarantee privacy, continuity, and physical security, problems that ordinary billionaire wealth cannot reliably solve. This is where the distinction between private wealth and crown-linked assets becomes operational rather than philosophical. Charles benefits from extensive jewelry vaults, estimated at $680 million, historic artworks, and inherited collections that cannot realistically be sold without destabilizing the monarchy itself. These assets are not designed for monetization. They are designed to anchor legitimacy, preserve lineage, and signal permanence. Their value is real, yet intentionally illiquid, ensuring wealth is conserved rather than consumed. This is not inefficiency. It is control through restraint, a strategy mirrored by the most durable dynasties in Asia, where assets are structured to resist liquidation even under political or economic pressure. The comparison with Queen Elizabeth II reveals how powerful this system truly is. At her death in 2022, her personal wealth was estimated between $470 million and $640 million. Charles surpassed that level rapidly, not by creating new enterprises, but by inheriting assets engineered for appreciation and shielded by a 1993 monarch-to-monarch tax exemption, eliminating inheritance tax entirely on roughly $500 million in transferred wealth. That single mechanism explains why Charles appears significantly richer than his mother without expanding the empire itself. The system compounded the value automatically. At this level, wealth is no longer built through activity. It is maintained through positioning inside a framework that converts time into value. Charles does not need to grow his fortune aggressively. The design ensures it grows on his behalf, quietly, predictably, and with minimal exposure. That is why his wealth resists precise valuation, because it was never designed to behave like modern money. It was designed to endure. The Duchy strategy. 64 years of silent wealth building. For decades, the most important wealth-building machine in King Charles III's life operated without headlines, press conferences, or public fascination. It did not look like ambition. It looked like patience. While the world waited for a crown, Charles spent 64 years quietly reshaping an institution that would later define his financial independence long before inheritance ever arrived. That institution was the Duchy of Cornwall, and it was never meant to behave like a traditional royal estate. On paper, the duchy exists to fund the heir to the throne. In practice, Charles treated it as a multi-generational family investment fund, engineered for durability rather than spectacle. When he inherited control of the duchy in 1969, its value was modest, its management conservative, and its purpose largely symbolic. By the time he became king in 2022, it had evolved into a portfolio worth over $1 billion, generating a stable annual income of $20 million to $30 million without relying on public funding or volatile markets. The assets themselves reveal the strategy. The duchy owns roughly 135,000 acres of land across England, including farmland, residential developments, commercial real estate, and coastal properties. These are not trophy assets designed to impress. They exist to solve structural problems that most billionaires face constantly: cash flow volatility, political risk, and long-term preservation. Agricultural land generates predictable income and holds value during inflation. Residential leases create steady, decades-long revenue streams. Commercial properties offer compounding rent without exposure to speculative cycles. Charles also pushed the duchy into sustainable architecture and renewable land use decades before ESG became fashionable. This was not ideology, it was risk management. Sustainable estates attract favorable regulation, long-term tenants, and political goodwill. A single mixed-use development under duchy control can quietly generate tens of millions of dollars over its life cycle while remaining largely invisible to public scrutiny. That invisibility is not accidental. It is protection. Crucially, the duchy exists outside the typical billionaire playbook. It cannot be sold, it cannot be fragmented. It is exempt from corporate tax in its structure, yet voluntarily pays income tax to maintain legitimacy. This design prevents the most common failure of inherited wealth: liquidation under pressure. The Duchy forces continuity. It exists to guarantee that the heir is never financially dependent on Parliament, donors, or markets. That is its real purpose. By the time Charles ascended the throne at 73, his financial position was already secure. His personal lifestyle, staff, travel, and security were funded not by inheritance, but by decades of disciplined asset stewardship. The crown did not make him wealthy, the preparation did. This is why Charles did not need to learn how to be rich after becoming king. He had already spent a lifetime mastering the quieter, harder skill: how to make wealth endure without drawing attention to itself. The tax advantage no billionaire can buy. The most powerful asset King Charles III inherited in 2022 was not land, jewelry, or cash. It was a legal advantage no billionaire on earth can replicate, regardless of intelligence, lobbying power, or net worth. When Queen Elizabeth II passed away, Charles received assets estimated at $500 million, yet paid $0 in inheritance tax. Not reduced, not deferred, eliminated by design. Under normal UK law, estates above the threshold face inheritance taxes of up to 40%. For a private billionaire, that would have meant losing $200 million instantly before a single asset could be reinvested or restructured. For Charles, the transfer occurred under a 1993 monarch-to-monarch agreement, a constitutional mechanism that permanently exempts royal successions from inheritance and capital gains tax. This was not a loophole. It was a safeguard written into the system itself. The logic behind this exemption reveals how royal wealth operates differently from private fortunes. Taxation is designed to slow or fragment concentrated private power. The monarchy, however, is structured to never interrupt continuity. Assets must pass intact from one sovereign to the next, regardless of market cycles, political sentiment, or public opinion. The objective is not enrichment. It is institutional survival. This distinction matters. Private billionaires spend their lives fighting entropy, taxes, divorces, lawsuits, market crashes, heirs who sell too early. Royal wealth avoids these threats by removing discretion altogether. Charles did not optimize his inheritance. He simply stepped into a framework that makes erosion structurally impossible. Jewelry vaults worth over $500 million, estates valued at hundreds of millions of dollars, and historic collections transferred hands without triggering liquidation, audits, or forced sales. Critics often frame this as privilege. Strategically, it is something else entirely. Risk elimination. Tax is volatility. Volatility creates exposure. Exposure invites leverage. The monarchy removes that chain at its first link. This is why royal wealth grows slowly but never collapses. It is insulated from both ambition and error. What makes this system especially resilient is restraint. Charles voluntarily pays income tax on personal earnings, despite not being legally required to. That gesture preserves legitimacy while leaving the core architecture untouched. The inheritance exemption remains absolute, untouchable, non-negotiable. In the world of extreme wealth, power is not measured by how much you accumulate, but by how little you are forced to surrender. Charles did not inherit a fortune that could be spent recklessly. He inherited a system that cannot be broken by success, failure, or time. And that is the kind of wealth no market crash can ever reach. The Crown Estate, a public asset that feeds the throne. The most misunderstood source of King Charles III's power is not a palace, a vault, or a private investment portfolio. It is a structure that looks public, behaves private, and produces cash with the reliability of a sovereign bond. That structure is the Crown Estate, and it operates in a category that does not exist anywhere else in modern capitalism. The Crown Estate is not owned personally by King Charles III. He cannot sell it, mortgage it, or pass it to his heirs. On paper, it belongs to the nation. In practice, it functions as a permanent revenue engine that feeds the monarchy without exposing it to commercial risk. That distinction is the secret. In the 2024-2025 fiscal year, the Crown Estate generated between $1.4 billion and $1.45 billion in net profit. This was not driven by luxury, retail, or tourism, but by control of infrastructure that most governments failed to secure decades ago. Nearly half of the United Kingdom's seabed falls under Crown estate management, allowing it to lease offshore wind farm sites at industrial scale. As Europe raced toward renewable energy, the monarchy quietly became one of the continent's most strategic landlords. Every dollar of this profit is formally transferred to the UK Treasury. In return, Parliament allocates the sovereign grant, which funds the royal household, security-adjacent operations, staff, travel, and palace maintenance. This exchange creates a financial illusion. The monarchy appears publicly funded, while in reality it is self-financed through an asset pool it never has to defend, manage politically, or explain commercially. This structure solves three problems simultaneously. First, it removes business risk. Charles never needs to endorse brands, launch companies, or expose the crown to reputational damage. Second, it stabilizes cash flow. Offshore wind leases, urban property rents on streets like Regent Street, and long-term land contracts produce predictable income immune to fashion cycles or consumer sentiment. Third, it preserves legitimacy. By surrendering profits to the Treasury, the monarchy frames itself as serving the public interest, even as it secures guaranteed funding in return. No private billionaire enjoys this configuration. A tycoon must choose between control and liquidity. The Crown estate offers both, without ownership. It is neither fully public nor private, neither capitalist nor socialist. It is institutional wealth, designed not to grow explosively, but to endure indefinitely. This is why the monarchy does not chase money. The money is already embedded in the system, and systems, unlike fortunes, do not panic, overextend, or collapse. Lifestyle, discipline, and the cost of being king. You don't understand the cost of being king until you realize that comfort is not the goal. Control is. For King Charles III, daily life is engineered less like a palace routine and more like a command system designed to keep an institution functioning without interruption. His schedule is stripped of indulgence. Days often begin between 7 and 8 a.m. and run deep into the night, sometimes past 3 a.m., with no formal lunch breaks. This isn't eccentricity, it is operational discipline. When a monarchy survives on symbolism, rhythm becomes power. Every hour must signal stability. Every appearance must reinforce continuity. In 2025 alone, Charles completed 533 official royal engagements, the highest number recorded for any senior royal that year, while undergoing ongoing cancer treatment. That workload carries a hidden cost, the infrastructure required to make endurance look effortless. Maintaining that image requires spending that dwarfs personal luxury. When security, transport, staffing, and classified protective operations are included, the true annual cost of the monarchy exceeds $650 million per year. This figure does not buy pleasure. It buys insulation. Protection teams, advanced security sweeps, armored transport fleets, encrypted communications, and temporary lockdowns of entire urban zones are not optional. They exist to ensure that the crown is never vulnerable, never rushed, never exposed. Even Charles's personal habits reflect institutional logic. His wardrobe includes roughly 60 bespoke suits, each costing about $6,500, and more than 50 pairs of handmade shoes and shirts, often priced at $1,300 per item. These are not fashion statements, they are uniforms. Dedicated staff maintain them to exact standards because visual consistency is a form of authority. A monarch who appears worn or careless signals weakness, not humility. Behind closed doors, his residences function less like homes and more like secure compounds. Palaces such as Buckingham or Balmoral require continuous maintenance budgets running into tens of millions of dollars annually, not for opulence, but for security hardening, communications, resilience, and structural preservation. These buildings are not assets to enjoy. They are symbols that cannot be allowed to decay. What makes this lifestyle unusual is not excess, but restraint. Charles does not spend to escape responsibility, he spends to absorb it. Money is used to eliminate friction, remove uncertainty, and preserve the illusion that the crown operates above ordinary human limits. This is why the system is so expensive, and why it has lasted. But the question hanging over the 21st century is unavoidable. Can a structure that costs hundreds of millions of dollars per year, built on discipline rather than popularity, survive in an era that demands transparency over tradition? If you think this kind of power maintenance is unique to Britain, leave a comment with your thoughts. What the life of King Charles III ultimately reveals is not excess, but design. First, true long-term power is rarely owned outright. It is embedded in systems. The British monarchy does not chase profit. It positions itself where profit flows automatically through land, law, and time. Second, the most durable wealth is protected not by secrecy, but by legitimacy. Assets tied to tradition, history, and national identity are far harder to confiscate or dismantle than private fortunes. Third, elite dynasties understand something many modern billionaires overlook. Tax efficiency is not optimization, it is architecture. When rules are written centuries in advance, compounding becomes inevitable. This same logic appears across Asia's ultra-wealthy families, where land trusts, sovereign-linked assets, and generational holding structures quietly outlast political cycles and market crashes. Wealth at this level is not about spending, it is about continuity. If this analysis changed how you think about power and money, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel. In part 2, we move beyond crowns and into a modern dynasty that controls billions without ever ruling a country, a family whose influence operates entirely behind the scenes, yet rivals monarchies in scale.